Judges, are you ready? Okay, you can start my time. Hello, my name is Hazra Amekji and I'm the Prop 1 speaker. First, I'll be going over the framework, then introduce two new contentions. In this time, 16 and 17-year-olds are just as involved in politics as any adult. They lead important rallies and start big movements. Even so, some people still don't think they should be given the right to vote. The current voting age is 18. However, some people believe it should be lowered to 16, while others think the age limit should stay at 18. Our definition for voting age is a minimum age established by law that a person must attain before they become eligible to vote in a public election. Our weighing mechanism is utilitarianism, which is generally held to be the view that the action that is the most beneficial to the masses is the action that produces the most good. Now I'll be introducing my first contention. Higher voter turnout. Lowering the voting age will ensure a higher voter turnout. Younger people carry a reputation of barely ever voting or having a very low voter turnout. However, recent studies from the United States Election Project show that the voter turnout for ages 18 through 19 in the 2020 election was over 52% of all eligible voters in the age group, a 20% increase from the 2018 elections. In fact, the United States Census Bureau states that the voter turnout for all ages had increased from 61.4% of eligible voters in 2016 to 66.8% in 2020, a historical increase that had not happened for years. By themselves, 18 to 29-year-olds have increased the voter turnout by a large margin. Adding 16 and 17-year-olds to the mix will immensely increase the voter turnout. Unlike the past, today's young citizens show interest in politics, so allowing a wider range of ages to vote will increase the amount of people playing a part in our country. Allowing teens to vote from an early age will develop a lifelong habit of voting in them, increase the number of people voting not only in the present, but also in the future. This habit will also rub off on family members, a phenomenon called the trickle-up effect that could greatly impact the voter turnout. Next, city-states. Research from 2014 shows that in Vienna specifically, turnout for 16 and 17-year-old first-time voters was 64%, significantly higher than the 56% turnout for 18 to 20-year-old first-time voters. This means that including younger voters ages 16 and 17 will greatly increase the voter turnout, thus representing the country better. Our impact is if we lower the voting age to 16, the voter turnout will become higher. Votes will fit the public preference and it will lead to a better quality of life for the entire country. My second contention is participating in politics. In today's world, young adults are quite involved in politics. A teen activist, Tyler Okeke, says, young people in our generation have been extremely involved in politics, informally, in the form of movements, in the form of organizing protests. Namely, we've been the lifeblood and at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement, of the #MeToo movement, of the movements for immigrant justice and environmental justice. Many protests and movements such as Black Lives Matter and climate change are led by youngsters under the age of 18, still in high school. They organize entire events that empower people to change the way they think or live. We saw them on the news, the papers, the internet, the TV. As you know, we've seen many teens step up when no adult would. And as I mentioned before, they're younger than 18. Teens are working for this cause. They care about their country and world. They're showing it by their movements and are being ignored. They want to say in the government to reach out to more people regarding what is happening in their society. According to Next City, in several cities around the country, they're already voting in local elections. These adolescents contribute so much to our country and its politics, yet they do not get the chance to vote for what they believe. If we lower the voting age, teens are given flexibility and standing to vote. Votes address and solve current important issues and it would make our country and the world a better place. Thank you.
All right, opposition one.
Is the judge ready? My name is Sharia and I will be the opposition's first speaker. I agree with all the definitions stated as well as the weighing mechanism. I will start off with a refute and then finish with my contention. The proponent talked about how many 16-year-olds share the same responsibilities as adults. While that may be true, 16-year-olds are not ready to make such important decisions. As I say in my contention further on, a teen's prefrontal cortex is going through major development. This is why the teens think with the amygdala, which is the irrational part of the brain. In other words, this is why 16-year-olds are not ready to vote on such big civil topics, especially if it affects them. Many civil topics impact 16-year-olds, and this is why it's important to keep the voting age the same so that they do not make the wrong decision. Not to mention, many of the rights teens gain when they turn 16 are only legal with parental consent. If they need parental consent, that likely means they lack some aspect of psychology that differentiates them from adults. If 16-year-olds still need parental or adult consent for many of their rights, this means they still need a little bit more maturity before being able to do things like voting. Not to mention, most 16-year-olds don't live on their own, and those who do need parental consent. So they are using parental guidance and support in their general life. Therefore, the teen's guardian are the one who should be voting for things that concern them. Moving on to my first and last contention. Young people are easily manipulated. Lowering the voting age to 16 would lead to a disastrous outcome in our government. In addition, research in neuroscience suggests that the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, is still undergoing major reconstruction and development during the teenage years. The frontal cortex is what enables us to weigh dilemmas, balance trade-offs, which are all necessary tools needed to make the right decision in civil topics. Adults use this rational part of the brain. However, according to the University of Rochester Medical Center, teens think differently. Teens think with the amygdala. This is the irrational part of the brain. This means many of the decisions made using the amygdala are drastically affected by emotion. Younger people who are not knowledgeable in civil topics will often be swayed by friends, social media influencers, or propaganda they see online. Sophomore Gabby Llewellyn said, and I quote, "I'm 16, and theoretically, if I was able to vote, I feel as though I am informed about politics, but not correctly. I only ever hear about politicians who people don't like or make jokes about. Their views get twisted and changed through social media, and therefore I can't get a good enough understanding or grasp on their actual view." Take a moment to think about this. A 16-year-old herself doesn't believe that she's credible enough to vote. In a UK research group, more than a third of young people said that their vote was influenced by something that they had seen on social media. It is scary to think that more than 1/3 of 16-year-olds are influenced to vote based on things they see on social media. As stated in the American Federation of Teachers, without an understanding of the structure of our government, our rights and responsibilities, and the different methods of public engagement, civic literacy, and voter apathy will continue to plague in American democracy. The proponents for lowering the voting age to 16 brings up the point that 16-year-olds are not knowledgeable in civil topics because they have no reason to, and if they were given the right to vote, they would take an interest. However, the opponents of lowering the voting age do not disagree. We believe that they can take an interest and learn about politics. We as opponents are concerned about how well they will be able to find unbiased facts and handle trade-offs and vote with an unbiased mind. Thank you.
Prop 2.
Off-time roadmap, I'll be counter-refuting and refuting, and then I'll introduce 2 more new contentions. If you're ready, Judge, my time starts now. First off, my opponent said that the brain isn't functioning properly and that the prefrontal cortex isn't developed properly in teens. Using his same logic, does that also mean that since your brain isn't fully developed until you're 25, you're not allowed to vote until you're 25. And not only that, but a recent New York Times op-ed by adolescence psychology expert Lauren Steinberg advocated for the importance of distinguishing between hot and cold cognition in youths. Teens do lack elements of hot cognition, including impulse control and emotional regulation, which my opponent stated, which basically means it's harder for them to make rational decisions under pressure. But by the age of 16, teens have maturely developed cold cognition. That means they can make rational decisions when they are calmer and have time to process information, which Steinberg argues that the circumstances most people find them in while voting. By age 16, he writes, adolescents can gather and process information, weigh pros and cons, reason logically with facts, and take time before making a decision. So his refute still does not stand anymore. Not only that, but he said that they don't live on their own, so they don't experience, but that's irrelevant because a lot of people still live with their parents. Like old people, a lot of them live with their families. Does that make them unable to vote? They said that he stated that a teacher said that the American democracy was going to crumble because teens aren't educated properly. And therefore, if they vote, they aren't gonna do what's good for the country. But circumstances will change when that if the voting age is lowered. Not only that, but teenagers are prepared for whatever comes out. They're not going to vote just for fun. Students know what happens in politics, and they are parts of protests. As you can see in the examples that my first speaker said, so many high schoolers these days are in the front lines of everything that's happening in our current world affairs. Your generalized statement makes me question the validness of your argument. Teens can be trusted. You said that teens are making reckless choices and that decisions they make are not valid, which hints that you think the adults are the only mature ones. The way you're stating it seems that adults are oh so wise and they make just the right decisions for everyone. And adding on to what he said about the brain not functioning properly, if you didn't know this, people with mental disabilities are still given the right to vote. You say that the brain isn't developed properly, but someone with an actual mental illness is still allowed to vote, but 16-year-olds aren't, which they already have the cognitive ability to make a decision in a calm and someone who can gather and process information in a calm setting. That doesn't make sense. My first contention that I'm introducing is that it has worked in other countries. New Zealand, Scotland, Brazil, Austria, Cuba, Argentina, Ecuador, and many other countries have been turning the voting age to 16. According to Euronews, from Brazil, we see that there has been a 29% increase in voters after this policy was implemented, and a 34% increase in political involvement by parents, students, and others due to the trickle-up effect. This proves that there will be a higher voter turnout if the voting age is lowered now and in the future. Not only that, but during the independent referendum in Scotland in 2014, the inclusion of the youths aged 16 and 17 produced positive results. Most of them who felt inadequate to vote resolved to actively seeking information that enabled them to make informed decisions to the voting day. This informed the decision of Scotland to lower its legal voting age to from 18 to 16. By lowering the voting age, so many countries have prospered, and we can only take an example from them and follow. My impact, which is other countries have lowered voting age to 16, and increasing the voter turnout and educated voters makes better decisions that represent the population. US stands innovated and advanced compared to the other nations, which will lead to a better quality of life for the people and the country. My second contention, that we'll have a representative democracy. By lowering the voting age, we are increasing the number of eligible voters in the country's most diverse generation, amplifying their voices on decisions that will affect their future. According to Vox, this generation is the most ethnically diverse generation in American history. Not only that, but young men are more interested in politics, young women less, because they rate their political knowledge less highly, although according to tests, young women possess the same knowledge as their male peers. Even though these young women are smart and talented, they feel inadequate. If the voting age is lower, there will be political education implemented at a younger age, making sure that everyone is and will be able to vote without stereotypes or ideals holding them back. By lowering the voting age to 16, a higher variety of people will be able to vote, which makes the laws and democracy of our nation better represent its people. By impact, lowering the voting age will give more opportunities for different races, younger people, and different genders to vote, meaning that there's more representation of the population, leading towards the better quality of life for millions of people, and therefore a better advanced and better changed country. Thank you.
Okay. Solid speech. Does Op 2 want to go?
Are the judges ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, I am Partha Lakhandi, the second op speaker against the claim that the voting age should be lowered to 16. I will start off with some refutes and then I will present a contention of my own. First of all, I would like to state that the Proposition 2 says that people who, it's shown that even though some teenagers still live with their family, they have experience even after that. That's not exactly what we said. We were aiming towards the point that that 16-year-olds are represented through their families. Also, they said that people with mental illnesses are not allowed to vote, so why not 16? That's more of an equality question than a question about psychological needs. Also, I would like to say that if the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until age 25, then why are you attempting to push the voting age even lower from 18 to 16? If you're keeping it at 16, then the decisions are going to be even more uninformed than they were at 18 and above. Not to mention, other countries are not the US, so we don't know the full effects of a 16-year-old voting age inclusion. Most of the countries Prop 2 stated were far less politically powerful than the US. So these impacts may not be true when it comes to the USA.
POI, aren't they all democracies?
They may all be democracies, but the US is far bigger. And that also means that they have far more voters and their results may be a little more skewed or even possibly drastically worse than those of the other countries.
What about our Maryland example?
Maryland is just one small part of the US. It's not the entire US included. If you were to do this on a large scale, it may not be as effective. Moving on to my first contention, younger voters may make immature political decisions. 16 and 17-year-olds who are still in 11th and 12th grade are still learning. Their learning is incomplete and their brains aren't fully developed. This means that they're likely to make immature and unwise political decisions, contributing to bad political decisions. According to a book by National Geographic Kids, Why Over 1,111 Answers to Everything, scientists discovered that the white matter connecting your frontal lobes, which control your decision-making process, to the rest of your brain isn't fully formed until you reach your mid-20s. Think about it. If it's not fully formed until you reach your mid-20s, how can you lower the voting age from 18 to 16? Already, I would say that the voting age is too low. Why are we pushing it down even further?
POI,
Yes.
if the government lowers the voting age to 16, will they not inform the kids about this?
They will inform the kids about this, but that doesn't necessarily ensure that everyone will participate, and that also won't ensure that they make politically wise decisions. Not to mention, the law can't use immaturity as a reason to restrain someone from voting, so there's no legal protection against the bad political decisions made by an immature 16 or 17-year-old. As said by commonsensemedia.org, 60% of teens who get news from YouTube say they are more likely to get it from celebrities, influencers, and personalities as compared to news organizations, 39%. The difference is even more apparent among daily YouTube consumers, 71% versus 28%. This not only shows that 16-year-olds are likely to get their news from somewhat unreliable sources and also have incorrect information, it also shows their lack of maturity, as it shows that they trust famous figures over reliable ones. Including younger voters into the voting community may result in bad decisions caused by the immaturity of these new voters. If young, immature voters were to accidentally support bad decisions, there could be all sorts of unforeseen consequences. So it is therefore clear that 16-year-olds shouldn't be able to vote, as their lack of maturity may wreak havoc on our political system. Thank you.
TOI. So isn't our government
The end of
formed
the speech. I don't think you can give a POI.
that?
The
Okay.
last minute of the speech.
Protected time.
Yeah.
Okay. I am Ronald Clark. Is the judge ready? Okay. My name is Ronald Clark, and I am on the opposition side against the claim it should be reduced to 16-year-old. I am the third speaker. First, I will be summarizing our refutes, then I will be summarizing our contentions, and then I will provide my two-world analysis. I will now be summarizing my refutes. First, the proponents talk about how many 16-year-olds share the same responsibilities as adults, and while that may be true, many 16-year-olds are not ready to make such important decisions. Teens' prefrontal cortex, and another one of our refutes are a teen's prefrontal cortex is going through major development. This is why teens think what they may belong to the irrational part of the brain. In other words, this is why 16-year-olds are not ready to vote on such big topics, especially if it affects them. This is why it's important to keep the voting age the same, so they do not make the wrong decision. The proposition then said that many grown-ups still live with their parents, but these grown-ups have gone to college and have spent some time away, unlike these 16-year-olds. Then the proposition stated that mental illness people should be the same as 16-year-olds by our logic. But mental illness people have different needs than 16-year-olds, so this is a question of equality. For our final refute, many of the rights the teens gain is when you turn 16-year-old. When you turn 16-year-old, are only legal with parental consent. If they still need parental consent, that likely means that they lack some aspect of psychology that differentiates them from adults. The proposition is saying that the brain fully changes at 25-year-old isn't lowering the voting age, making it worse for the 16-year-olds. Thank you. Oh, sorry. My tab closed. I will now be summarizing our contentions. The summary of our contentions indicate that 16-year-olds should not get to vote as they will be put under influences and stress as they are too young to start voting. 18-year-olds get to vote as they've been through college and worked hard to finally earn the right to vote as an individual. Without anything to potentially put 16-year-olds under stress or blame, they too will also have a better chance at earning this right without being disturbed by other problems and make their life more stressful than what it already is. I will now provide my two-world analysis. My two-world analysis states that voting age essentially should be kept the same as votes will be biased and therefore unfair for all citizens as well as the votees. They will be put under biased and unfair voting, which could damage our nation overall. If you do what the proposition suggests, by telling us to trust 16-year-olds who do not have the amount of knowledge needed for voting, then it would be very unfair, which would cause chaos among the government. Thank you. I'm done now.
Judge, are you ready? Okay, I'm gonna start now. You may start your timers. Hi, my name is Shreya, and I'm the Proposition 3 speaker. I will start off by summarizing my team's refutes and refuting my opponent's points, and then I will summarize my team's contentions and go on to a two-world analysis. So first, my teammate said that people with mental disabilities are able to vote, but 16-year-olds can't, and that's not fair. The opponent replied by saying that it's more of an equality thing. So if it's an equality thing, a 16-year-old should be able to vote too. I mean, these people are participating in the country, and they're leading like protest movements that are changing the way that people think. And yet, mentally ill people are able to vote, but these people aren't. And then my teammate says that that the circumstances will change. So when the voting age is lowered to 16, obviously the government is going to change the curriculum. Those students will learn about the government and civics. The country will not leave our young voters uneducated about what they're doing. And then my teammate also said that that you should be able that the brain doesn't develop until you're 25. So shouldn't you not be able to vote until you're 25? So if 18-year-olds are allowed to vote and other countries are allowing 16-year-olds to vote, everything is going fine. And America itself is a greatly populated country, but there are other countries very similar to America. And then the opponent said that young people will wreak havoc on the political system by choosing wrong leaders. However, this is not true because checks and balances can overthrow these bad leaders. And there are many other people voting. 16 and 17-year-olds will not be the only people voting. There are like another 300, 200 more million people who are there to vote. I will now move on to summarize my team's contentions. So our first contention was that there will be a higher voter turnout, and this will lead to votes that fit the public preference better, and that's like a better quality of life for the entire country, which is millions of people. And since 16 and 17-year-olds participate in politics, often more so than adults, they should be given their basic right to vote. And their votes will address and solve current important issues such as climate change that threaten our world and our country. Our third contention was that lowering it will cause a representative democracy. So by allowing people of different races, genders, ages to vote, you're having a more representative vote that's a better quality of life for not only these certain older adults, but also for all other ages. And that's a better country. And also, we said that it has worked in other countries. And since it's worked in other countries, it'll probably work in US, and that will better our country and the people's quality of life. Also, the opponent did not refute our second contention, which was that teens participate in politics. So you have to believe that is true. Thank you.